There is a certain kind of person who grew up in a house full of adults but with no child beside them. They learned to pour their own cereal, entertain their own thoughts, and build entire worlds inside their bedroom. Worlds no sibling ever entered, worlds only they could see. This kind of upbringing looks peaceful from the outside. No sharing. No fighting. No noise. But it carved something specific into their psychology. A deep, quiet ache for connection they were never fully taught how to find, wrapped inside a fierce love of being completely alone. But if you know someone like this, or if you are someone like this, the only child who turned into an adult who feels perpetually caught between craving people and needing to escape them, then this is the video that was made specifically for you. Today we are going to decode the psychology of people who grew up as the only child. Why their brains developed differently. How it quietly shapes every relationship, every room they enter, every fear they carry. And most importantly, what they can do to finally feel at peace with who they are. But before we name the signs, we have to ask the real question. Why does growing up without siblings shape a person so deeply? The answer lives in two places, inside the biology they were born with, and inside the particular emotional architecture of the only child home. The first group are children born with what researchers call sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS, a trait found in roughly 20% of the population. Their nervous systems absorb environmental input with unusual depth. Without siblings to dilute that sensitivity, the world of the only child home becomes amplified, intense, and formative. The second group are children shaped purely by circumstance. Imagine a 7-year-old sitting at a dinner table with two parents who are emotionally exhausted. There is no brother to share the weight of that silence. No sister to make a secret face across the table. The child learns to read every adult emotion alone, and survival slowly becomes personality. Both paths rewire the same structure, the default mode network, or DMN. This is the brain's internal storytelling system, active when a person is daydreaming, self-reflecting, or mentally simulating other people's emotions. In only children, deprived of constant peer input, the DMN becomes extraordinarily overactive, turning inward again and again. What begins as adaptation becomes identity. The rich inner world they built as a child because no one was there becomes the world they prefer as an adult. The hyper-awareness of adult emotions they develop to survive becomes the emotional intelligence that both defines and exhausts them in every relationship they form. So when this kind of child enters adult life, they carry an invisible backpack. Inside it, a hunger for depth, a terror of intrusion, an almost allergic reaction to chaos, and a love of solitude so strong it sometimes feels like a superpower, and sometimes feels like a prison no one else can see. The first sign is that they are deeply, almost unnaturally comfortable being alone, but they quietly panic inside groups. Picture a woman named Layla. She spends a Saturday completely alone, reading, cooking, rearranging her bookshelf, and by evening she feels full, genuinely restored. But put her at a party with 8 people, and within 2 hours she feels like a phone battery dropping to 3% with no charger in sight. This happens because solitude was not just a habit for the only child, it was their primary emotional language. Their prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for self-regulation and social processing, was trained not through sibling noise and negotiation but through long hours of interior quiet. Groups feel like a foreign country they never studied. The emotional consequence is a quiet kind of loneliness that is particularly cruel. They want connection. Genuinely. They miss people the moment they leave. But the moment they arrive, something in them wants to leave again, and they carry guilt about that contradiction for years without understanding why it exists. This tension between craving people and being drained by them is not weakness. It is the fingerprint of a nervous system built in silence. And it leads directly to the second sign. The second sign is that they carry an invisible, relentless pressure to be extraordinary, not just good, but exceptional. Think about a young man named Daniel. He has never once handed in an assignment he considered merely adequate. If he writes an email, he rewrites it 4 times. If he cooks dinner for someone he loves, he treats it like a Michelin star audition. The bar he sets for himself exists somewhere above the clouds where no one else can see it. The psychology behind this lives in how only children experienced parental attention. Every achievement, a drawing, a report card, a joke at dinner, was received by 2 sets of adult eyes with full, undivided focus. The brain of the child, powered by mirror neurons and the need for approval, learned that performance equals love, and quietly never unlearned it. The emotional consequence is a life lived slightly above their own capacity. They are rarely proud of themselves for long. The moment they reach a goal, the goalpost moves. They tell themselves this is ambition. But underneath it is the old childhood fear, that without excellence, they become invisible in the eyes of the people who matter most. They are, in many ways, their own harshest audience, applauding everyone else and never quite satisfied with their own performance. And this internal perfectionism connects seamlessly to the third sign. The third sign is that they overthink every social interaction, often long after it has ended. Imagine a man named James who had a perfectly pleasant dinner with a close friend on Tuesday. By Thursday night, he is lying awake replaying a single sentence he said. Was it too much? Did it come out wrong? Did his friend's pause last a half-second too long? He is rehearsing a conversation that is already over and completely forgotten by everyone else involved. This is metacognition in overdrive, the brain's ability to think about its own thinking, now running without an off switch. Only children, who spent their childhood observing and analyzing adult behavior instead of practicing casual peer interaction, develop metacognitive loops of unusual depth. They became expert analysts of other people's emotions, then turned that same lens on themselves. The consequence is a kind of social exhaustion that accumulates invisibly. Every conversation becomes a performance reviewed afterward. Every interaction carries a small cortisol spike, the stress hormone quietly activating each time they try to decode whether they were enough, too much, or somehow exactly the wrong version of themselves. They are remarkably good at understanding others. They are remarkably terrible at giving themselves the same grace. And this is not disconnected from the fourth sign. It is the same river flowing in a different direction. The fourth sign is that they possess an extraordinarily rich inner world, and they find it deeply, almost painfully difficult to let other people into it. Picture a woman named Myra. She has, inside her mind, entire landscapes. Fictional characters she has followed for years. Philosophical questions she revisits like old friends. Aesthetic preferences so specific and layered that most people find them exhausting to hear about. She does not share this world easily, not because she is cold, but because she has always been its only inhabitant. The default mode network again. In only children deprived of consistent peer interaction, the brain's internal simulation engine runs continuously and elaborately. Researchers studying the DMN have found that those who spend significant developmental time in self-directed, imaginative solitude develop inner narratives of exceptional complexity. A private universe built carefully, brick by brick, over years of quiet. The emotional consequence is a specific kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of feeling fundamentally unseen. They ache for someone who can enter their inner world and find it beautiful rather than overwhelming. And because that person is rare, they spend much of their adult life with the deepest part of themselves perpetually behind glass. They are extraordinary companions for themselves. The challenge is learning to become an extraordinary companion for someone else. Which leads us to the fifth and final sign. The fifth sign is that they struggle, often silently and with great shame, with compromise, especially in close relationships. Think about a man named Ethan. He is kind, generous, emotionally intelligent. But his partner wants to choose the movie, rearrange the furniture, or change the dinner plan at the last minute, and something in Ethan's chest tightens in a way he cannot fully explain. He gives in, but feels something small and essential has been taken from him. He hates that he feels this way. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, in only children was never regularly calibrated through sibling negotiation. Most children learn through hundreds of daily micro-negotiations. Who sits where, whose turn it is, whose idea wins. The only child's amygdala never received this training. So in adulthood, even small compromises can trigger a low-level threat response, a feeling that autonomy itself is under siege. The emotional consequence is guilt layered over rigidity, layered over loneliness. They do not want to be difficult. They are not selfish people. In fact, they often give extraordinary generosity in other areas. But their sense of personal territory, their need for control over their environment and routine, feels existential in a way they cannot explain without sounding unreasonable. They are not unwilling to share their life. They are still learning, deeply and bravely, what sharing even means, because no one was there to teach them when it was the easiest thing in the world to learn. And here is what most people never stop to realize: the only child did not choose to grow up alone. They did not choose the silence, the undivided parental gaze, the dinner table with no secret language, the bedroom that belonged entirely to them. They were handed a particular kind of childhood, and they did the most extraordinary thing any child can do. They built a whole universe inside it. So what can they do? Because they cannot simply turn this off. They cannot unlearn the solitude, unwrite the DMN, or suddenly become a person who finds group noise energizing and compromise effortless. The path forward is not about dismantling who they are. It is about understanding the architecture and gently expanding it. There are 3 freeing principles that only children, once they truly absorb them, find genuinely transformative. Not as performance or effort, but as a slow, quiet shift in how they experience themselves in relationship to other people. These principles do not ask them to change. They ask them to see more clearly. The first principle is: solitude is not failure, and connection is not intrusion. When they feel drained after social time, that is not a character flaw. It is a neurological reality. Naming it, actually saying "I need 2 hours alone to feel like myself again," removes the shame and creates space. Boundaries spoken clearly are not walls. They are doors with handles on both sides. The second principle is: good enough is a form of love. Perfectionism, for the only child, is old armor. It protected them from feeling invisible. But in adult life, it keeps other people at arm's length. When they allow something to be imperfect and offered anyway, an honest conversation, a meal that was slightly burnt, a plan that changed, they are not failing. They are finally arriving. The third principle is: sharing their inner world is not vulnerability. It is invitation. The richness they carry inside them, the landscapes, the questions, the elaborate inner life, is not a burden to inflict on others. It is the most interesting thing about them. Speaking it aloud, even imperfectly, even partially, is not exposure. It is the beginning of being genuinely known by another person. When they practice this letting go, the letting go of performance, of perfect solitude, of the glass wall around their inner world, something extraordinary begins. They do not lose themselves. They expand. They discover that intimacy does not erase the self. It reflects it, gently, in someone else's eyes. They were forged in stillness, like a candle lit in an empty room. The flame was always real. The warmth was always there. What changes is simply this: they begin, slowly and bravely, to move the candle toward the window, so that the light can finally reach someone standing outside in the dark. These are people who think in extraordinary depth, feel with unusual intensity, and love with a kind of quiet devotion that rarely announces itself loudly. They are not broken. They are not cold. They are not difficult. They are the product of a particular kind of growing, and that growing made them remarkable in ways the world does not always take the time to recognize. If this feels familiar, leave a comment below about which sign fits you most, whether it is the overthinking, the perfectionism, the rich inner world, or the complicated dance between solitude and connection. Reading your words reminds every single person watching this video that they are not as alone as their childhood quietly taught them to believe. If this video helped you feel lighter, a little more understood, a little less strange, please press like and share it with someone who grew up as the only child, or who loves one. Thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, because there is so much more of this to explore, together.